like, how that's implemented, etc. So if I was to become a mom and have a child that was to go off to university, and I would want to know, how safe is my child? By law, those universities are expected to report in a specific way certain acts and things like that.
Okay. And because of the way that this case is shaking down, I'm going to go with the acts that are sexual in nature. There have been, this case brings up the instance where Peyton Manning put his bare bottom allegedly on a female trainer's face. There's that incident. There is the more recent incident with wide receiver Dre Bowles. The story that broke yesterday was that head coach Butch Jones called him a traitor for helping a young woman that was raped by a couple of University of Tennessee football teammates of his. And that resulted in him basically feeling unwanted at the campus and eventually transferring to UTC, but only after he was called a traitor by his coach and beaten up. And it's starting to add a lot more validity to this lawsuit, because the lawsuit also referenced, the rapper Lil Jon came on campus and his music is not appropriate. And so people heard that one and didn't take it as seriously, but there's starting to be a lot of validity to this lawsuit.
Interesting.
And so all of these things are starting to add up. Do you believe, from the things that you've heard, the stories flying around, not that you've gone into all the detail, but do you believe, from what you've seen, that the University of Tennessee has a culture of violence against women?
That is a really big statement to make.
And because that's the statement the lawsuit's making now. I'm not personally making that statement, nor am I asking you to necessarily make that statement. But if the things in the lawsuit are true, would that indicate that?
If the things that are in the lawsuit are true, it would definitely be something to examine.
Okay, because Butch Jones calling one of his wide receivers a traitor to the team would lend itself to some kind of culture where this kind of thing is not necessarily taken as seriously, or at least as urgently as it should be.
That would definitely be something to be examined, for sure.
And the athletic director came out today. Butch Jones denied that happened. Of course, I don't know what he's supposed to do, because you admit that you're toast. But the athletic director said he's not worried. He believes Butch entirely. And here's the thing: I don't even think the university should go after Butch Jones, because you have a situation where you have sexual violence going across the basketball team and other teams on campus. So if that is a case where someone said this nicely. And someone said it nicely before. If it was one coach having 3 to 5 incidents, then you fire the coach, which is not the case with Butch Jones. He really only has that one incident that he's been involved in with this. But if you have several coaches, each with one incident, then you have to go higher up the food chain and say, okay, athletic director Dave Hart or the chancellor of the school, somebody is not taking something seriously. And that's even in the lawsuit, where it's just the school seems indifferent when people report rape.
Now, again, I don't work for them. I'm not part of that culture. So I couldn't say definitively, what their stance is or what that looks like. And, to be fair to them, they are an organization, and it's hard to be any type of organization, especially a university, and not have some sort of awareness, because not only is it mandated by law that there is some sort of awareness and support, but also in today's day and age, especially with all the things that have been going on, I would have to argue that I'm sure there is a knowledge. Okay. And that being said, all I'm saying is, I think our culture, with all due respect, we have a very shame-based culture, whereas when something comes up like this, our first response is, how could they? What's wrong with them? Why wouldn't they know? And it's very shame-based in order to say, you should have done better. You should have known better. You should, without really looking at the bigger picture. So I do want to preface our conversation with that knowledge, saying, to the leadership and the administration. If leadership and administration are genuinely doing their job, then honestly, in my opinion, we probably wouldn't hear much from them other than a statement or two here or there, because it's a private affair. Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
So honestly, the media can say whatever they want, but that means that, and the media is not in most, if not any, of the closed door conversations, but I trust and believe, in my opinion, and from what I've seen of how these things tend to work, their administration are having very intense conversations on what they're going to do, how they're going to handle it, and what that's going to look like.
I'm sure. And you're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. We're being joined by Janelle Billingy. She's a master's level social worker, accented in trauma
and emergency management.
You've got a lot of accomplishments. It's hard for me to remember all of them. Okay, but you're very accomplished. But we were talking about shame, and so like I kind of do want to roll this over, because we were talking earlier in the week about Kurt Rambis, the New York Knicks head coach. He liked on Twitter, either accidentally or just not realizing that people could see his Twitter account, a pornographic tweet, and the internet just killed him for it. Like immediately just jokes about Kurt Rambis and the New York Knicks and all of these things just started coming up. And it was like, my first reaction was, oh, that's funny. And then like I felt bad because I don't know Kurt Rambis, and like, why should Kurt Rambis feel terrible for this? But like you were saying, like there's a culture of shame that we have in our country. Could you talk a little bit more about that culture?
Absolutely. I will say this. I think just in my time, like I work in a middle school. I work with middle schoolers. And that being said, it's very interesting to see, the big picture, because we're talking about adults here. Mm-hmm. But when we think about what our effect has on the generations coming up, it's almost, very condensed and concentrated. And you can see kind of how these younger ones are coming up with the things that we think are just individual rights, but they don't know any better. And so when I say that, I think our culture is very much individualistic, even though we promote, equality, and we promote opportunity, and we promote we promote the greater good, and we promote, opportunities to reach out and be whoever you want to be, and uniqueness and originality. I mean, the list goes on, right? When you think about that, we promote that with an individualistic culture that has us in our phones, on our media. And what are we posting about? Ourselves, our experience, why I am important. And while all those things can be beautiful and can be used for wonderful things, what we're doing and what we're teaching is the world of self, which is making people self-centered. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I think there are negative connotations when we say self-centered, because we think of being egocentric, we think of being selfish, which I'd like to clarify, even though at times those can be interchangeable. They're very different when you look into the nuances of this. And I think it's important to look at the nuances, especially in this capacity. So when we have this very self-oriented culture, what happens is there is no accountability that is held for the individual when the individual is expressing themselves externally, right? But on the flip side, everything that's coming in internally requires that the person, well, you can't talk to me this way. You need to treat me right. You need to respect my rights. You need to respect my individuality. And while all those things are true, the culture systematically does not, in my opinion, does not leave room for it to be converse, for it to be reciprocal, for me to say, I'm going to embrace my individuality and you are going to embrace your individuality, but we're going to do that together respectfully. That last bit, I think, is excluded in a very individualistic culture.
It is very excluded, because if you actually look at it, Kurt Rambis likes a pornographic tweet and people start talking about, well, why is he doing this? Isn't he married? All of this stuff just starts coming up just for no reason.
Right.
And yet the people who say terrible things about Kurt Rambis get to say terrible things and they get off scot-free. Like we don't go after random guy who...
There's no accountability.
Right.
And that's the thing. So one of my favorite researchers, Brene Brown, she talks about shame. She calls herself a shame researcher. And she has several great books out. One of the most recent ones I read by her called Daring Greatly. Fantastic. And in it, she talks about, she has this well-known TED Talk, Google or search Brene Brown. You'll find it well-known. It's probably one of the most popular TED Talks. And she talks about how she had like this vulnerability hangover almost, like, oh my goodness, did I really just say that to all of these people? that kind of a thing. So there's kind of that concept of you being the sharer, right? But then she talks about, over time she's on the web and people are saying nasty things like, why is this woman so fat, and different things. What does that have to do with anything? But because there's no accountability, because people are just going on and naming themselves anonymous and just spewing almost hate. I mean, it could be based on all kinds of things, your self-concept of yourself, experiences that you've had. People are not being held accountable and not taking the responsibility of the privilege of having such an individualistic culture. So with Kurt Rambis, how did I say that right?
Mm-hmm. Kurt Rambis. Yep, got it.
He comes out and he's doing his thing. Only God knows what he was really doing. You know what I mean? Only he really knows whether or not he really even understood what it was that he was doing, right? But because there's no accountability and we have a shame culture that looks at everyone and says, you should, and this, like, think about our memes and things like that. It's very negatively based. It's at the expense of the person or the subject of which we are highlighting. And again, working in middle schools, I see this very, very black and white in terms of these kids don't seem to have the fully developed concept of how this can be hurtful, because of course this is what everybody else is doing. So of course I'm going to do it.
Right.
So when you have this gentleman who's now just doing what he has to do, and he turns around and realizes, oops, I made a boo-boo, before he can realize, you have half of America sitting there telling him what kind of a person he is, what kind of a mentality that he has, even though people don't know who he is.
Right. And Twitter is a pack. Twitter is a pack mentality. I use Twitter all the time, so I can honestly tell you, it is a very validating. It's a very validating place. You when it's time to start coming down on people and dropping the hammer on people, it's very validating. You feel good about yourself for going, oh, look at what's going on. Let's just make fun of other people. And the rest of Twitter validates you for your terrible behavior.
The more derogatory that you can be, the more support that you get.
Right.
But it's always at the expense of someone else, never the individual.
That is true. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. We've got Janelle Billinger, master's level social worker, here explaining to us about shame and how that culture kind of promoted the culture of violence against women on the University of Tennessee campus, which is what that lawsuit is saying. So let's take it back to Tennessee. How does that mindset make it so that women on a campus don't feel safe?
Beautiful question, Keon. We're talking about shame and how that kind of goes into this, as has been termed rape culture. Shame, again, is that thing where we're saying you can't put a name on it. It's that innate feeling of disconnect when you're thinking about self, when you're also thinking about shaming someone else, right? So you think about something like rape, right? We think about culture. Culture is art. Culture is education. Culture is the things that bring a group together, right? But when we think about those things, we don't usually think about rape, right? Mm-hmm. But you think of something like rape, that's a very shameful experience in and of itself, right? Because it is highlighting things of a person that are not desired, right?
Correct.
So you think about creating a rape culture, and a lot of feminists even will use that. I mean, everyone. Well, let me not say everyone. A lot of people have been known to use this word or this term, rape culture, to define our society, a society that almost idolizes the concept of rape and the concept of forcible behaviors, and doesn't give any accountability, any type of consequence to that would actually require a change of that behavior. We're talking about media, we're talking about music, movies, social media, whatever. So on a campus, what that would mean is simply there's an ideology on the campus that it's happening and we're aware of it, but we're almost letting it happen. Not even, one could even go as far as to say glorifying it. People wouldn't feel safe because it's saying, if I was to report, then I would then be shamed. I would be put out at the expense of, and it could be whatever, the sports department or whatever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's pretty intense, especially since, this concept of being aware of rape and what that looks like is very recent. There's a book called Lucky by a woman by the name of Alice Sebold. If you have a chance, read that. It's fantastic, about a woman on a university campus who was brutally raped and her process in coming out and how she was shamed for even saying anything when she was like, I almost died. And everyone's like, well, why would you say something? You asked for it because you're a woman. Now, does rape happen to men as well? Absolutely. It's a whole other conversation.
Right. And we can open that up on another day.
Right. But in short, I guess I would say, if I could put that into a quick sentence, I would simply say this. When we're talking about understanding culture, when we're understanding rape and shame, all these things come together: culture, shame, rape, and all these things. You're seeing people excelling in a way or moving forward at the expense of another group.
All right. Well, thank you, Janelle, for joining me today and just explaining that situation, because it's very complex, and I wish we had more time, to be honest with you, because there's so many layers to how that is and what people feel like. And I think that we should just take the time to point out, University of Tennessee is not the only college campus that struggles with this problem. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And the Cleary report, Jean Cleary basically was raped, and her family now has made it a federal mandate that all campuses have to publish these statistics. So that's public knowledge if anyone wants to look up on any campus rape and things like that.
Okay, so you can look up the Cleary report for the University of Tennessee. If you just Google it, you'll probably find it pretty easily. Thank you, Janelle, for joining us and explaining and breaking down. We'd love to have you back. I go into all of the moralizing of sports, so I'd love to have you back. That's what I like. But this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. And we'll get back to sports business as usual next.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. I'm going to Carter Shooting Supply.
Carter Shooting Supply.
That's right, Carter Shooting Supply. They're having a great sale on all of their guns right now, and it's name brands like Smith & Wesson, Ruger, Springfield, their AR-15s. They've got the hottest gun in the land right now, the Sky 9mm. Man, it comes in all the cool colors. If you're an Alabama fan, they've got crimson. If you're a big orange fan, they've got an orange one. All the women are loving the pink one and Tiffany blue. Plus, it has a lifetime warranty replacement. If the gun is stolen, all you need is your police report or receipt, and they'll replace it free. It has a 60-day full money-back guarantee. That's Carter Shooting Supply. They're in Harrison right there at 6210 Highway 58.
Are they online?
Yes, they are. That's cartershootingsupply.com, or give them a call, 423-344-1099. Now, this sale's not going to last too long, so you need to hurry up and get there. And they do have a great indoor shooting facility. You can get your Tennessee handgun carry permit also. That's Carter Shooting Supply, 423-344-1099. You need a place for your party or maybe a wedding reception for 100 or even more. Maybe you'd like to host a small trade show for your business, and you need a very affordable venue. Are you looking for a place for your birthday gala or services to start up a church? Look no further than the Hidden Gem in Hickson. It's an overlooked, newly appointed reception hall right here in Hickson, Tennessee. Big space, small price. That's right, big space, small price. Call Mr. Chu and ask for a tour. 316-7388. That's 423-316-7388. He'll tell you a lot more about the venue. Rent this venue today. Just call 423-316-7388 and ask for Mr. Chu.
Hello, I'm Mike Little, candidate for criminal court judge with 25 years of criminal court experience, which makes me the most qualified candidate. The experience I have gained from handling over 4,000 cases in state and federal court has equipped me with the ability to be fair, impartial, and independent. As your next criminal court judge, I will focus on keeping Hamilton County safe. I view this position as a public service and will strive to improve the daily operations of court. I humbly ask for your trust and vote in the March 1st Republican primary.
Paid for by the committee to elect Mike Little. Barry Abbott, treasurer.
Expect some leftover clouds, but drier weather through the nighttime. Cold overnight, lows near 30. For Friday, though, some sunshine will return, a nicer day. Still cool, highs near 50. The weekend, lots of sunshine with a warming trend with highs by Saturday back into the 60s. Check out the Fresh Oil New Wine Conference at Abba's House, March 6th through the 10th. Pastor Ron Phillips welcomes Perry Stone, Tommy Bates, Randy Caldwell, and others for this week of encouragement and renewal. For more, FONW.com. And I'm Soar Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
When the weather turns bad, turn to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. On the net, hotnewstalkradio.com. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. From the Hot News Talk Radio Weather Center. Chattanooga, we've got you covered. When the weather turns bad, the Tennessee Valley turns to Hot News Talk Radio.
Go, 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 go. You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. The man being sought after in a rape case in Nashville was arrested on Wednesday afternoon in Chattanooga following an extensive high-speed freeway chase down I-75, which ended in multiple wrecks at the East Brainerd Road exit. One Tennessee Highway Patrol officer was injured in that wreck with minor injuries. Charged was 20-year-old Cardarius DeMonte Caldwell, who police say sexually assaulted a woman from Rutherford County whom he met on Facebook. Police say he held a gun to her at her house on Cherry Street while assaulting her. They also say he stole a car from a gas station and sped off before he was stopped at the East Brainerd Road exit many miles later. Hamilton County Sheriff's deputies say that there was a shooting that happened on Highwater Road in Soddy Daisy. When deputies got there, they did find one person with a gunshot wound. The deputies are still investigating further. The scene is secure as of now. To keep a leg up on the weather, make sure you get the Bloom Sky app for your smartphone. Search for Chattanooga, and you'll get the live view from us here at Hot News Talk Radio. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on at Hot News Talk Radio.
Hot News Talk 1240.
So the situation in Tennessee, it's there's a lot of sad news in that situation, right? Like there's a lot of things that you don't want to talk about it for multiple reasons, but one of which is like you don't want to see the University of Tennessee in that light. I don't think that the University of Tennessee is inherently a bad place. I don't think that I don't think that you should feel bad like rooting for the school, but I do think that there are issues there underlying. But there was a strength and conditioning coach that actually saw Dre Bowles and broke up the initial altercation between him and the two teammates that would later jump him. But he intervened in the situation twice. He actually intervened, broke up the fight initially, or broke up the threatening initially, and then followed Dre Bowles in order to continue just looking out for him. And so in all of this, I will say that there's a silver lining. I think that there are things. Dre Bowles himself is someone to be applauded because he saw another student in need. He saw another student in a situation where she was powerless. And despite the nature of the culture of the locker room, he helped. You've got to applaud that kind of mentality and that kind of behavior because that's true courage. Okay, that takes bravery and that takes courage. And so while you want to focus in on like even the players don't feel safe because if you did the right thing, you were being called a traitor to the campus. Like despite all that, he still did what he believed to be right and to be correct. And I don't think that should be lost in this story that is overwhelmingly just bleeding sadness everywhere. And here's the thing too. With a story like this one, I feel like the lawyers are releasing information little by little because Dre Bowles being called a traitor, this story is back in 2014. They have the information. The document being released it's 64 pages long. You can go and read all of it. It's deadspin.com is a place that you can go find it. There's a lot of information there. But I feel like that they're releasing this information to keep this case relevant, to keep it from fading away into the background like so many cases do, especially cases that involve rape. Like we'll hear a news report about an alleged rape or any violent action, and it just falls away into the background. Like we just forget about it, partially because we don't want to think about it, and partially because, quite sadly, it happens often enough that it's part of our everyday lives to hear about it, not do anything about it, and continue moving on. And so to keep this story relevant, they're releasing little pieces of information. They're just gonna cut Tennessee to pieces with this information just slowly trickling out, as opposed to just dropping it all at once. And I think that, again, it's like keeping the fox in the chicken coop. You have a conflict of interest here. The school wants to be seen as a positive place. You want to continue to attract students. You want to continue to attract athletes. You want to continue to exist in the way that you've been existing. And so on one hand, you want to say, oh, no, look, nothing to see. No rape culture here. Nothing sad to see over here. But at the same time, you want to acknowledge the fact that there are victims on your campus. You want them to feel safe that if they do report something, that it'll actually be taken seriously and actually be taken care of. And I don't think that the one department should be trying to handle both of those needs. And you've got the athletic department where it's basically you're trying to handle both of those needs. You're having a rally saying, hey, this is the rally about how we don't have a culture of violence against women, which seems to me to be overly defensive. Just way too defensive, because while people have questions about your culture, the rally would suggest that you have questions about your culture too, and you'd like to cover them all up with a rally. So it's a hard story to talk about, and also it's so complicated, and as more information gets released, it just becomes so complicated, much more complicated than we could have initially imagined. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. You are listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me today. We're talking about Tennessee, but we're talking about sports, man. We're just all over the map right now. But we got to talk about that story because it is the big story, and B, you can't pretend it's not happening. And if anything positive came out of that Ray Rice situation, it's that we can't pretend anymore that that's not happening, and we don't get to just ignore it. It's being addressed. That is the best that we can do, especially in the media, that the desires to go, well, what are the Ravens' chances of making the playoffs? Like, it doesn't matter. You know, we're in a situation where Ray Rice punched his wife. So we're at Tennessee, and it's like Tennessee could be a top 10 team next year, a preseason top 10. They've got a shot to do something special. This is a good football team. They lost some games because goodness knows what Butch Jones is thinking sometimes. But this is a good football team, but you have to get away from the football aspect and get back to the human aspect of these players. They are human beings. They make mistakes. The administration makes mistakes. But I think collectively, if you have too many mistakes, that is the foundation for a culture that isn't something that you should be proud of, let's say. So that, all of that. Here's the thing too, and I'm going to talk about Reggie Ragland, because we are entering the NFL Combine, and so I Combine, and I want to talk about all the players in the SEC as we get up to the NFL draft that are going to be drafted. They've got strengths, they've got weaknesses, and I want to use that time to kind of highlight what I've liked about every player that I've watched over this past season. So today we're going to talk about Reggie Ragland, but one last observation about the University of Tennessee before I move on, which is this: the university itself is obligated to release information, the Cleary Act. We talked about it a little bit at the end, didn't get to talk about it as much as I would have liked. We just ran out of time in that interview with Janelle Billingy. But the information about this violence and about the rape cases and all of those things has to be released by the university because of the Cleary Act. The Cleary family had their daughter raped, and it was a violent one, and they decided to take up this cause that every university has to release that information. You don't get to hide behind any particular veil to try and protect yourself. Because you look at college campuses, and I believe somebody said this on Deadspin.com. You look at college campuses, they are a lot like the NFL, that you want to deal responsibly with these situations, but also by dealing responsibly with these situations, you lose yourself revenue. You potentially lose yourself money, right? Because now you're admitting that this awful thing happened on your campus. Like, we basically invited a rapist to our campus. We recruited him, and now he lives here. And so, like, you're like the conflict of interest, it just keeps coming back up again and again and again, that you're more incentivized as the university to drag your feet a little bit. You're more incentivized as the university to not necessarily do the right thing on that, because you will lose money. You will lose money. Okay? But the right thing is the right thing, and it should be regardless of how much money you stand to make or regardless of how much money you stand to lose. So that. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how to get out of that story, because it's sad. It's sad. And I want to live in a nation, in a state, in a city where this doesn't happen. But you've got to acknowledge that it does in order to shine a light on it and hopefully get rid of it, and hopefully get us to that point where at least it doesn't happen as often as it currently is. This is AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. So the NFL Draft Combine continued today. You had quarterbacks showing up. You have punters and kickers and special teams players, doing bench presses and all that kinds of thing. So, you've got those things. Highly fascinating stuff, I tell you. Highly fascinating stuff. The NFL Draft Combine is one of the most boring things on earth, and I can't stop watching it. I love to watch the Combine. Like, it is brutally boring. Like, you just are just watching guys do the same thing over and over and over again. Some of them are faster. Some of them are slower. It's like watching the Olympics, except there's not really any drama because you don't win anything directly at the end of it. We don't know what your results mean until the NFL draft. There's just so many things. Like, you could be better than another guy, but another guy could be a better fit than you, get drafted ahead of you. So whatever you did in the Combine doesn't mean anything. Plus, you've got game tape that coaches are going to go look back at and go, you run a 40, you look really fast in the Combine. They're going to go back and watch your game tape and go, but yeah, he looks slow in pads for whatever reason. And then you're going to drop back to where you were dropping. It's bizarre that we sit down and watch this, but we really like football and want to turn it into this 365-day a year thing. It's interesting, but I like Reggie Ragland from Alabama. He is an amazing dude. I went back to watch his game tape yesterday, and when I say I watch his game tape, I just watch people post entire football games on YouTube. Do you know this? I'm pretty sure. I don't want to say it to everyone because I don't want to ruin my thing, which is because I don't have game tape. I'm not a coach, but people post entire football games on YouTube. So I watch that and I watch highlights, and you can see, okay. Plus there's scouting sites that basically break down strengths and weaknesses of stuff. Like, you don't have to be a high level coach to look at a guy and go, he's good or he's not good, which is why last week we did a breakdown of Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is not last week, yesterday. Dak Prescott is a pretty amazing player. The person that I think he most could be like if he achieved his highest potential is Donovan McNabb. Big guy, big arm, accurate passer, mobility. He's got it. He's got some issues that he needs to work on, but Dak Prescott, he's really good. So today we're talking about Reggie Ragland. Reggie Ragland, 6'1", 260 pounds, inside linebacker from the University of Alabama, national champion, man. And what I really like about Reggie Ragland is that he is fast. Okay, old school kind of linebacker. He's got incredible downhill speed. He does a really good job of meeting fullbacks and just closing up holes. Like you've got a running back going behind a fullback, his lead blocker, and Reggie finds the fullback and slows him down. And in a lot of cases, will even track the running back and stop him. But he does a really good job of containing his gaps. He's got decent lateral speed. And for the most part, he takes great angles. When there's a player, he takes the angle that gets to him the fastest. He's a strong tackler, wraps up guys. Okay. I personally am a huge fan of that because I don't like the guys that go in to tackle with their shoulder. Are you afraid of the contact? Is that what's happening here? Don't go in with your shoulder because then you've got a guy bouncing off of you and he's still on his feet. Reggie goes in there, wraps the guy up, brings him down. And he's pretty good in coverage for a linebacker. You know, he's got a number of really cool interceptions from just tracking the quarterback's eyes, from making the correct play in space. So he's going to be a benefit to any NFL team, especially the kind like I seen a lot of mock drafts having Reggie Ragland going all the way to the Jets. And I like him for the Jets because if he, plays in the NFL at the level that he played coverage in college, the way the Jets blitz, he's going to have some opportunities to drop back and make a play on the ball. You're trying to force the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. If he throws it, Reggie can pick off a careless pass, okay? He's not exactly a master cover corner, and playing the linebacker position, no one's asking him to be that, but a careless pass he's going to take away from people. And he's a solid run stopper. He brings the lumber. When he comes after you, man, it's going to hurt. You're going to feel that the next morning. He does not take any prisoners. Reggie Ragland, he's not kidding around. Okay, he's got some weaknesses. Everybody does, all right? Reggie Ragland. Sometimes he takes weak angles. He usually takes good ones, but sometimes he takes really weak angles, and you scratch your head and go, how on earth did you ever think that from that angle you were ever going to reach that guy? You just have to wonder it sometimes. He gets lost in space occasionally. Like when he is in coverage, sometimes he's not entirely certain of where to go. You can get behind him. You can throw over the top of him if he's not aware of where his man is in space, the person he's supposed to be coveraging. His downhill speed is impressive, but like I said, his lateral speed is only decent, and I think that there are a lot of question marks there because you've got a lot of running backs who are shifty, moving from side to side, trying to get you off balance. Can Reggie make those plays at the NFL level? He was able to make it in college, but again, is his lateral speed quick enough to make that at the next level? And of course, there's always the worry because people worry about this with Alabama. Alabama plays an old school style of smash mouth defense. They want to come in, they want to dominate you, they want to beat you up. Is Reggie Ragland too old school for today's new NFL? The new NFL is offensive heavy, it's pass happy. You want to be able to have guys out there that cover very well. You're probably going to be covering a lot of tight ends, okay? You're going to be covering a lot of backs coming out of the backfield. Can Reggie Ragland be a more coverage-oriented linebacker? That's a question that I have. I'm not the only one with that question. If you want someone to just be your Brian Urlacher, Ray Lewis kind of linebacker, just stuff the run, then yeah, Reggie Ragland is your guy. And I think that's why he's such a great fit for the New York Jets. But if you are a team that you're playing a defense that you do a lot of coverage or man-to-man, I worry. I worry about Reggie Ragland in those scenarios. So I think it's going to be an interesting choice. I do believe, obviously, Reggie Ragland is going to be a first-round player. I mean, he's got all the credentials, he's got all the qualifications, and he is a fantastic player. Okay, that cannot be taken away from him. And he helped to anchor an Alabama defense that, for all the world, was one of the most amazing defenses of the last season in college football, in a sport in college football where it's hard to find defenses that play that way, right? Like the game against LSU, to me, was a defining moment because it's not. To stop Leonard Fournette, you usually have to stack the box. Like you have to bring 6 or 7 guys to stop or slow down Leonard Fournette. Alabama didn't do that. In fact, there was only 2 or 3 plays in that game, just a handful of plays where Alabama did load up the box to stop Leonard Fournette. What they did was they just brought 4 guys. You know, when Leonard Fournette was able to get past the defensive line into the next level, he met Reggie Ragland, who brought him down. So that's impressive in and of itself, because there were not a whole lot of answers for Leonard Fournette. And Alabama had those answers without having to bring extra guys, without having to blitz. It blows your mind. And it blows my mind anyway. Like, that is impressive. Okay, when you've got a running back of that caliber who is carrying the offense of the Tigers basically for much of the season. When you've got a running back of that caliber, you usually have to bring extra guys. Leonard Fournette is a man playing amongst boys, except for the day that they ran into Alabama. Then he was playing with other men, and they weren't terrified of him. And Reggie Ragland is a huge, huge reason as to why that ended up working out the way that it did. I'm pretty impressed by Reggie Ragland. I think he's going to be a solid NFL player. I don't have a draft grade for him. I haven't been doing the draft grades. I don't know if I should. Should I do that? Do the draft grades and put him on the Facebook page? Because I'm telling you, it's time consuming and it's heart crushing is what it is. Like when you're just there and you're like, yeah, I give this guy an A, and then like 2 years down the road, you're just totally wrong. Dude's a bust. Okay. I'll think about it. This is AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. And on a day where we just get more information about the University of Tennessee, it really stinks. It really stinks, but I don't want to single out the University of Tennessee. There have been stories on other college campuses of fraternities, for instance, coming out to protest rape protests. You're protesting a protest, and you're on the wrong side of that protest. Okay, you got a bunch of guys running around yelling, "No means yes, yes means harder." Let's not pretend that Tennessee is the only place with this problem. They're the only place right now with an ongoing lawsuit. They're the only place right now with an ongoing Title IX lawsuit that is this highly publicized. And so I don't want to make it seem like let's just bomb Tennessee. Georgia has problems. Alabama has problems. Florida has problems. Florida State has problems. They all have problems, okay? Florida State had the Jameis Winston thing last year, the rape case that the Jameis Winston and Florida State basically buried. I know nothing else about that case. They buried it. They made the information very hard to find. They settled out of court, so they don't have to talk about it. The young woman who claims that she was raped, she doesn't have to talk about it. And I think because of the lack of information, we're just kind of giving Jameis Winston and Florida State a free pass, because you're looking at it and you're like, wow, I thought that after Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning had his sexual assault case kind of come up in the 90s, 96, 97. And so it was like, okay, this is before social media. This is never going to happen again. A situation where a quarterback that's considered that good and that high profile winds up being basically just not scrutinized for that at all. Jameis Winston was still the number 1 overall pick. He wound up going very unscrutinized for the situation that he was involved in, the alleged rape that he was involved in. And I thought that would never happen again in an age of social media. That happened in 2014. It happened in 2014, and nobody said anything. It's not like Jameis didn't have a history of just stuff. Like, we were looking at Jameis Winston not as a Johnny Manziel type of guy, but we're looking at Jameis Winston as a guy that's just like, seems to be in trouble all the time. And now we're at the point with Jameis that he hasn't been in any trouble since. And it's very, like, there's strong parallels to the Peyton Manning story, because Peyton Manning hasn't done anything since then either. Like, since 97, when he settled with the trainer, he hasn't done anything since. He's not like this overwhelmingly terrible person. He just had one case where it's just like you would have thought there was more scrutiny there considering the profile of the person involved, and there wasn't. And Jameis Winston's the same way. Just there was none. He just we talked about it for a couple of weeks and he just kind of faded into the background, which is just amazing and highly impressive that could happen in this day and age, which is why I want to talk about it, because I don't want those kinds of things to fall and fade into the background. We need to talk about the things that are uncomfortable to talk about, especially in sports, because it affects how we view the world. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch, and I'll see you next week.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm Sabrina with Sabrina Realty Associates. Now is a great time to sell your home. In our area, inventory is at an all-time low, which translates into higher sales prices. Call us today at 423-499-7780 to set up a free consultation and discuss our unique and aggressive marketing programs. We will provide you with a free market analysis to determine the right value of your home. Call us today at 423-499-7780 or visit our website at sabrinarealty.com.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-99.